Welcome, thank you for tuning in. Long time no see. I apologise that it's been so long since my last video, but I wanted to take a short break, which ended up being much longer than I expected because of some minor health issues, but everything's fine now. I feel re-energised, excited to be back out in the woods and making videos again. So what I wanted to do today was to look back at some of the images that I made in Scotland in February. I had a week-long trip there. It was a fantastic week. It started off a little bit flat in terms of the conditions, but then it just got better and better. And then by the last day, I think I made some of the best images that I've made in quite some time. So they're definitely worthwhile sharing in a video. Having a bit of a retrospective discussion around the composition, some of my thoughts and intentions when I made the images. So hopefully you'll find some value in that. And I think it helps actually that I've lived with these images for a while now and I still feel very good about them, which is a very positive sign. So yeah, let's take a closer look and hope you enjoy it. It was a very casual start to the first day. In fact, I didn't start shooting until the afternoon. And I met up with another photographer who took me to this very small area of birch trees, which was just brimming with character. Everything was laden with moss and lichen. There was winter ferns in the understory, juniper, pink and magenta hues coming through from the winter birches on the opposite hillside. It just looked fantastic, but the general feel, look and mood of this place was really quite different to what I'm used to. And I think in those circumstances, it's a real benefit just to take the time to get a feel and tune into the character of the place and try to decide on the types of images that you want to make. For me, everything looked quite haunted and ghostly, so that's the feeling that I wanted to get across. And because of the copious amounts of lichen, I just wanted to kind of fill the frame with that as much as possible, get consistency in colour and tone, and just concentrate on those beautiful drooping shapes. So this first one's quite a simple composition really, but really captures some of the essence of the location, I think. And then very, very close to that was this second composition, which is more complex, but if anything, I probably prefer this one. I kind of like the scruff of it because the place was very scruffy, so I wanted to embrace that feeling. But just as nice is those echoes, so those branches that fork down from the top. You've got the foreground one, the midground one, and the background one. And I love the feeling of that, as those just sort of softening towards that pinky magenta to background there. Again, a little bit of desaturation in the post-processing just to kind of keep that haunted feel coming through and keep the emphasis on that beautiful lichen colour. Moving slightly away from the thought process of filling the frame with a lichen, I went for more of a panoramic scene with this one. I'm a big fan of this because it's often difficult to find such order in a broad scene like this, but we have separation, we have balance, there's a lovely layer of juniper there, and just the fact that you can pick out all these wonderful characters and they all sort of seem to sit and have their own place. I love that because there's no one place necessarily that the eye wants to be drawn to that's much stronger than the rest of the image. I feel as if every single part of it has something to offer, and the beauty of broad scenes like that is it encourages the eye just to explore and spend time with the image. Big fan of this one, and you can just imagine how magical it must be in particularly atmospheric conditions, you know, when it's damp and foggy or on a misty morning. But even under those cloudy skies, scenes like this and the arrangement of colour, it just works, it really does. While in Scotland, obviously I'm going to photograph the Scots pine, so that's what we did on this particular day. So as with the first day, I'm going to pick out 3 of my favourite images to discuss. Now, this particular day was much more challenging because there was a lot of strong sunlight, high contrast in the woods. So in a woodland environment, that strong contrast of light and shadow, it really does make things quite difficult. So what I tend to do in those situations, particularly with Scots pines, is shoot towards the light. So then it becomes about simplicity and structure and allowing the pine needles just to illuminate under the sunlight, get all those lovely yellows and greens coming through, but also trying to find an opportunity where there's enough reflected light to illuminate the detail in the foreground as well. So as you can see in this image, the structure of the orange pine branches is just superb. Quite a simple image with consistent edges. The frame I've tried to dominate by the feature branches, but there's a hint of depth as well, just to help to set the scene. making use of some of that reflected light. So rather than having harsh shadows, we can bring out some of the coolness in the bark and the wonderful orange in those wavy branches. We started to move up the hillside of the glen and found ourselves in quite a boggy area, lots of tussoks of grass which were really ankle-breaking territory. Oh, hello Meg, are you having fun? Yeah, these grasses, although very difficult to walk through, they gave a wonderful effect when backlit, because you just got these little contrasting... I'm getting soaked here because Meg's shaking on the back of my neck. Sorry, yeah, so the grasses, when they're backlit and you just get these, it just defines the lumps in the grass and those warm colours contrasting with the coolness in the lichen on these characterful birch trees. And the wonderful thing about these boggy areas actually is you often get these writhing shapes in the birch trees. They never get particularly tall, but be more stout, and the branches start to wave around in these kind of more boggy environments. I'm relatively happy with this image. I must admit I wasn't feeling great that day, and I'd just awoken from having a nap in the heather. Honestly, they could have done with being a little bit more space at the bottom, but I like the kind of softness that the backlighting has given and how we've got a bit of depth in the distance there. So overall, yeah, quite a pleasant image. So as we moved later into the afternoon, some snow showers started to pass over. So we're kind of rushing around, you know, not really sure which way to turn, trying to find a composition to take advantage of this falling snow. I did make a couple of images, but I'm not, you know, massively pleased with them. So instead I'll share this one here. No denying this is an absolute fantastic specimen. Now I had to kind of run to get to this just before the light became too strong. So the snow was passing by very quickly, the sunlight was starting to emerge, which was setting to the west. So I just wanted to capture that lovely soft golden light, very quick reaction, that kind of instinctive process of thinking, right, it's all about the crown. I've got to fill the frame as much as possible with that crown of that Scots pine. But then I noticed the pine tree in the distance, a little bit of shuffling, making sure the pine branches weren't breaking into the horizon of the opposite mountainside. Position that tree in the distance for that little bit of extra depth. Beautiful golden light, the mountains obscured by the passing snow. Just a fantastic way to end that particular day, I think. So moving towards the end of the week now, I think this was the penultimate day, and things really started to turn with the weather. It was colder, it was windier, so we decided to head for one of the glens, which we thought would be a little bit more sheltered. So I found myself just on the edge of the tree line, and there's this beautiful characterful tree, some fallen branches. As you can see here, the light was just on the edge of the cloud, and it illuminated and elevated that texture on the trunk of the pine tree. Letting the background just fall into a slightly deeper shadow just emphasises that even more. Now it was a bit more exposed here. The wind was howling through just a little bit, so I've used a slightly longer exposure just to allow some of those branches to blur. I often like sharpness in branches, stillness, that sense of calm, but I think in this instance it would have been a real shame to try and hide that feeling. The feeling of the weather, it's something that I always try to capture in my images. So quite simple composition, nicely framed off, consistent edges, more beautiful contrasting oranges against the green, and some of that hint of coolness in the bark. Certainly a positive start for the first image that day. After a couple of hours, the temperature seemed to drop and the snow showers were becoming more frequent, more prolonged, and while I was walking through the snow, I spotted this particular scene. Now, I stood here for quite a while just trying to fine-tune the composition and enjoying being present and witnessing the landscape transform before me as the snow started to gather more on the branches and the heather. I really like the subtle connections in this. So starting from the Scots pine on the right hand side, you can see the branches just connect with the birch tree, and then the birch tree connects with the birch tree on the left hand side. And there's that little bit of framing as well of the distant trees. I mean, I took loads of frames of this image, just trying to find that sweet spot between snow movement, those diagonal lines of snow movement, and not getting excessive blur in the branches. We started to get quite wet and cold, so we decided to call it a day and head back towards the car. Just a slow wander, obviously keeping our eye out for any images along the way. And I spotted this scene, and I'm so glad I did, because I absolutely love this image. It's got a fairly long title of The Stick Man of the Caledonian Forest. You can almost see the path that is followed down in the bottom left-hand corner, and because of the direction of the snow, it feels as if he's just walking into the blizzard and you wonder where he'll go. And although he's the main feature of the image, there's also a careful consideration for the framing. You know, everything's kind of strongly anchored to the left, but I purposely had that hint of openness to the right where our friend the stickman will likely walk to. I think that kind of thought process, it kind of brings us back to that childlike imagination, which for me is what makes the woods so magical. So the final day, without doubt, the best day of the week, both in terms of experiencing the landscape and also with the images that I made. So I was sat in the B&B with my friend having our breakfast, just looking out the window and seeing the snow accumulate on the shrubs in the garden. Really very exciting, but despite the excitement, I'm never really in a mad rush to get out when it's snowing, because I'm quite happy just to give it time, let that snow accumulate so it starts to create these wonderful clean blankets across the woodland understory, or tidies up the mess of the heather on the heathlands. But because of the conditions, we decided not to head too far away from the accommodation. So we started off in this really quite sheltered birch wood where the branches of the birches were just arching over the pathway under the weight of the snow, and we just ducked under, and as I was following the path I spotted my first image, which is this one here. We were slightly more exposed by this point, as you can tell by those subtle diagonal lines of snow, and it's just a fantastic arrangement of birch trees. It does actually work as a square image, just concentrating on that centre portion, but I actually prefer this 16:9 aspect ratio because it gives a really nice balanced framing, and if anything kind of adds emphasis to the strength of the centre with its complexity of branches and those incredibly soft distant trees. As much as I like this image and just love working with complexity, I'm a sucker for relative simplicity when it comes to snow, so it's the open heathland dotted with downy birch which is where the magic happened for me. As we left the shelter of the slightly denser woodland, it just became this whole new world which was exposed to the elements. It was absolutely wonderful, just to kind of feel, you know, as I've said before, I think nature needs to be experienced in its extremes to appreciate all its different colours and shades. To work in this open area of heather, which is just dotted with these well-spaced, beautiful, small downy birch, was just wonderful. And both my friend and I commented on how these, because of the conditions, these trees just appeared as like pencil sketches in the landscape on this white canvas of snow. Very quickly I actually spotted my first image, because what I was drawn to was this kink in a downy birch. So I headed straight for that and then started to line up the composition, and this is the image that I came up with. The arrangement of trees formed a tremendous interaction, trees that are almost alone but very much together as their branch tips touch one another. I must have photographed this same scene 50 times, just waiting for that perfect moment of spindrift softness to obscure the distant trees and emphasise that wonderful balance and gesture which leads your eye to the centre. Honestly, it's very rare for me to get openly excited and confident about a piece of work, but I genuinely love this image. Due to the strong winds, I upped the ISO a little to ensure shutter speed, which froze those intricate graphite-like branches. For those of you that already own a copy of my book, Gathering Time, you might recognise this next tree, which is one which I first photographed in autumn 2020, but from the opposite side. As you can see, it's just a wonderful sculptural tree, and you can photograph this from many different angles and it looks fantastic. But what I've tried to do here is position myself in such a way that kind of separates out some of those branches and allows the sculpture of the tree to really shine through. Been very careful about the positioning of the distant trees, of course, and lots of frames taken again to capture that perfect moment where the spindrift softens the foreground heather, softens the tree in the distance. We've got the diagonal snow again, and that lovely pencil sketch appearance of those fine branches. Just a wonderful scene to both witness and photograph. I'm extremely extremely happy and to have made this image, and fortunate enough to have been there at just the right time. Just a couple of quick reminders and announcements before I disappear. My book Gathering Time is still available. It continues to get fantastic feedback, so thank you for that. It was recently featured in Outdoor Photography magazine. There's plenty of copies of the standard edition available, but if you are interested in a collector's edition, then there's not many copies of that left. So yeah, please take a look at my website if that's of interest. Something else which I mentioned a while ago is my exhibition this year, which is in collaboration with Joe Cornish, which takes place here in the North York Moors National Park. It's going to be a fantastic event. It kicks off on the Saturday the 16th of July, runs right through summer until the 10th of September. We've got guest speakers such as Mark Littlejohn, David Ward's going to be there, Sean Tucker, Lucy Lapwing. It really is going to be a fantastic event. I can't wait for that. So there are details on my website, please take a look. Also, the last two images that I've shown today, which I'm really fond of, and they're a little bit different to some of my other images, I've decided to put those available as a limited edition print. But what I'm going to do is just discount them for the next 2 weeks only. So for the next 2 weeks, I'll knock off at least 20%, but if the editions start to run low, then the price of them will go up. So if you are interested in having one of those prints on your wall, please take advantage of that discount, that lower price, and as always, your support is massively appreciated. But yeah, that's it for now. Hope you've enjoyed this episode and the retrospective view of those images. What I might do actually is do an editing video of those snowy images, just go through my technique and thought processes of how to tackle snowy scenes and how I go about printing them as well. If that is of interest, then please leave a comment below and let me know what you think, and any other thoughts as well. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. We're going to head home now, but hope to see you again very soon.